Hey everyone, it's Stephanie again, and you are tuned into the review of Married at First Sight, Season 6, Episode 5. So, let's just jump in because we have a lot to discuss for this episode. I think that all the couples had high and low points, okay? So I'm going to touch a little bit on what I thought was a high point, what I thought was a low point, and things that they could have done differently. So, first couple, Molly and Jonathon. It was really interesting to see them this week because a lot of what seemed so picture perfect was removed a little bit. So they, throughout the first few episodes, have been pretty congruent in talking about why they know they're matched together. Oh, this is why we're matched together. This is perfect. And it continues on in this episode, but you see some high and low points from them. High points being that they still get along really well, that they have fun together, that they can continue to see why they were matched together. Low points being the way that Molly responded to Jonathon's consistent high energy and things that she could have done better. So this is now, we're starting to get to a point in the relationship where everything isn't so picture perfect. You can start to see things that kind of annoy you about the person. That's any relationship. Like at first when we're all dating and it's so fun and it's new, that laugh is so cute. And then, a few months later, you're like, God, you chew that loudly. I didn't know that. How am I gonna live with that? You know what I'm saying? We all have those thoughts where it's kind of like, this isn't what I thought it was. Well, it is what you thought it was. We just romanticize the beginning because we're wrapped up in the emotion, we're wrapped up in the lust. So now she's saying that the adventurous, great energy husband that she asked for is annoying sometimes because it's all day long. How many of us can relate to that? Where, there is such thing as too much of a good thing and learning moderation. So throughout the episode, you see her struggle with his high energy and her being kind of, I guess, in comparison to him, low energy. And so she gets frustrated because he's kind of always joking, always at a 10. He doesn't really realize that because she doesn't communicate it well. And so it all comes out when they talk with the experts throughout each part of the episode. Each expert speaks to each couple. And during their interaction, she kind of said, it feels like being with a 12-year-old boy sometimes and not a husband, and it's kind of a turnoff. So he is, Jonathon is thrown off because she has never mentioned that. And it's really like a dagger because not only is it something that he didn't know about and something she didn't say, but also it's kind of like belittling in the fact that, it's like I'm with a 12-year-old and I'm not attracted to that. So here he is sitting here, very attracted to his wife, desperately wanting to move to the next phase, but he's still very patient and respectful. And she basically shut him down like big time and didn't see it coming. So a couple of things. If that were me, what I would have said if I was the expert is a couple of things. I would have said, okay, Molly, why haven't you communicated this? Because this is who he is. And so the recurring thing for him in the episode is, I want somebody to love me for who I am. So why haven't you communicated that? If your spouse is at a level 10 and you're at a 4, like sometimes you can say, babe, like knock it off or bring it down a little bit. Or, he might say, hey, pick it up. Let's do something fun. We kind of learn to structure ourselves around our partner's needs at different times because sometimes a certain aspect of you is needed more than others. So big fail for her because she just didn't communicate it and she didn't give him enough awareness to make that change. So you see him in the rest of the episode kind of like uncomfortable. I'm sure he's hurt by it, but also uncomfortable because he doesn't really know how to be. And if she would just be authentic and saying, hey, like, can you just turn it down a notch? Because I just really can't right now. And we all do that. Sometimes our spouses, or if you're in a long-term relationship, your significant other is, an annoying version of themselves. We don't have to sugarcoat it and say everything's always great. Sometimes when they're at a 10 and you need them to turn it down, just saying turn it down will really help things because it's a smaller part of a bigger picture. This is how you're communicating or not. about a lot of things. So if you can't talk about this stuff, chances are you're not going to talk about other things. And now he's going to be uncomfortable. And then that brings in trust or trust issues, because now I can't trust you to say what I need you to say or what you're thinking. And so now you're with somebody who's always wondering what you're thinking and wondering if you're being honest with them, and then wondering if they're good enough. And it's just like not a good place to see. So I would say to Molly, communicate more effectively, or communicate, period, because you didn't even say that, and it kind of threw him off. But they find their way back. I would also say to her, as the expert, I would ask her, what is a husband supposed to be? So she has said that a couple of times in this episode. He doesn't remind me of like what a husband is supposed to be, or this is not what a husband's supposed to act like. So one of the biggest things that we can take away is, okay, when you get together with someone, you really have to define roles, you have to define expectations, and you have to understand what your significant other views in the role that you're supposed to play. So for some, a husband is supposed to be, the traditional stereotype provider. He's supposed to be the protector. And then for others, maybe that's not as important as maybe somebody who's more consistent, or someone who's able to pick up on their emotional awareness and surround her with the care that she needs for her emotions, and protective in that way. So we really need to define. And I would say to you guys who are watching, if you're in this space, you really need to define what these roles are, because you're going to set yourself up for being let down. And it could be really simple stuff. It doesn't have to be like the big things. To me, little things make up the big thing. So if you are expecting that your wife is, you and your wife have breakfast every single morning, and your wife's not a breakfast person, well, guess what? It's not going to happen. Expectation failed. You know what I'm saying? And it's something that's so simple. So it's about learning to meet each other's expectations by knowing what they are, and then making adjustments. If that person is not a breakfast person, chances are we're not going to do it all the time. But we might do it sometimes, but not communicating and not even knowing changes things a lot. So that would be my question to her. What are your expectations of a husband? And you need to share that with your husband so that he knows, and you guys can adjust accordingly. So that is Molly and Jonathon. Let's see, Jaclyn and Ryan. So Jaclyn and Ryan, I think, to me, the veil is being removed from Ryan. So Ryan has, up until this point, this like picture perfect, rah-rah type of guy who is all about, marriage, and he's very excited about it, and he is. However, you're seeing like little layers of him, and everybody has it, but I think because we've seen him in such a perfect space for so long, it's kind of off-putting, where he's like kind of being a little bit of a jerk, I'm just gonna say it. So the last episode, and a couple of you guys touched on that in the comments about how he lied when they were talking about who was intimate first. And I completely agree with you. I wish he would have just said, and Jackie went along with it, but I wish he would have just said, we don't want to talk about it, we're not comfortable talking about it. People will make up their own conclusions anyway, so it really doesn't matter. It's what you're comfortable with, because I think being honest takes you so much further. Because if you remember the last episode, they're like all bonding over this honesty, and they're lying. They're like, oh God, we feel great because we haven't either. Well, here's this one couple who has, and instead of saying, hey, I haven't, or hey, we're not comfortable talking about it, they, Ryan just kind of like lied like really quickly, and everybody, from the comments were like, oh, that is kind of icky, like that is telling of other things. And I agree. But back to this episode, he also was kind of not so nice. He was, later on, the guys and the girls meet, he kind of pokes at John not having a job, and that Jephte shouldn't really talk to John, and I know what I'm doing with my life, and it was just like funny but not so. And I think a lot it translated with a lot of viewers that, okay, he's not this picture perfect, always up for it type of guy, and I don't think that anybody is, but I think that it's like a very, very mild form of like Jekyll and Hyde. He goes from being like really, really happy and go lucky to like this dark kind of, why are you being a jerk type of spectrum. So I'm trying to figure that out. What's interesting is There was no big thing that happened with Jaclyn and Ryan this time around, except Jaclyn is kind of questioning his authenticity, which to me lets me know that what we're feeling is what she's also seeing. So he doesn't really do anything to make her question that, but something within her is like, okay, he's what I'm expecting her to say in her mind. If I was her mind, I'd be like, okay, this guy's almost too good to be true. He's always super perfect. He's always super rah-rah. But here I am, who has gone through this extreme trauma, and can I trust this person who's always at this like perfect space? Like, I'm excited to be married as well, but is this real? She's wanting to see him remove some of the veil and be a little more authentic. And so she's not willing to really trust 100%. And at this point, like, can any of them? No, they've known each other for 6 days, but she's not really willing to give him 100% because I think she's waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I don't even think that's negative. I think she's kind of like, okay, let's get to the nitty gritty. Let's see what things are all about. Because in the episode before and this episode, they touched on the trauma of her losing her ex-boyfriend, you know, who she referred to as the love of her life a year and a half ago. Guys, a year and a half is not that long. I had a family member who lost their spouse suddenly, and that was, I think, almost 8.5 years ago, and that is still a soft spot because you never really recover from that. You kind of cope and you move accordingly, but I don't think you 100% recover from that. And because it's happened a year and a half ago, I don't think she's anywhere near, excuse me, anywhere near recovering from that. Everybody has their own process, but a year and a half is soon. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there, that I think she's still kind of going through it, which is perfectly understandable. But coming from that space, I think she's even more cautious and is wanting to see just a little more depth from him, to see if they can go the distance. He touches at the beginning of the episode how he really wants her to let him in because he fears that trauma might cause her to, you know, put a pause on how far they can go. And I don't think that's true. I actually think that she's willing to be open to going the distance with him. She just has to trust that what he says or who he says he is who he is. So they're still going really well. I think, you know, they're getting deeper, and I think that, you know, they're headed in the right direction. So that is Jaclyn and Ryan. Jephte and Shawniece. Reading your comments, you guys, it's hilarious. This couple has everybody super charged, and it's, you know, I echo almost all the sentiments, but because I just kind of see things the way that I see things, I'm still hopeful, y'all. I really am, and I'll tell you why. They had high and low points too. So their low points was because I want to end with the positive with them because I've been ranting for weeks. Okay, so their low points are that, you know, Jeffte's kind of still operating at I don't know what's slower than a snail, but whatever it is, it's probably dead. But whatever it is, he's operating at that. However, there is a little light at the end of the tunnel. So he's still kind of saying this is moving too fast. You know, towards the end of the episode, all the couples are talking about the next steps because we're at the last day of the honeymoon, and now the next step is to move together. So he's, you know, she's saying, well, you have a 2-bedroom and your roommate's moving out. And, you know, even though he's like, okay, you can sleep over and let, you know, and we'll figure this out, you know, he's still not moving, you know, willingly. It's almost like there's like somebody behind him, like shoving him. And in the confessionals, he says, you know, I know myself. I shut down if I'm not comfortable. And I'm like, how well do you know yourself? Because did you know yourself when you signed up for this experiment? Because if you did, I don't think that you should have. So you're still getting some of that pushback. You're still getting the stranger danger, which I think over 7 years old doesn't even exist anymore. You're still getting that. But I will say that when they had the session with Pastor Cal was able to kind of break through his understanding of what should be happening, because he touched on how, you know, at some point they're going to be over it. And I discussed that as well, because a lot of people were saying that they felt that at some point it wasn't going to work out. And I kept saying, I think that they could turn a corner, but I also feel that there may be a point of no return. And you see a little bit, of that when Shawniece responds during the session, like, listen, I just get to a point where I'm like, do whatever you want to do, and I just walk out of the door. Because she is so willing. Even though we've all discussed, and I've seen it in the comments, that she needs to pull it back. She's a little dramatic. I think she's definitely not the greater offender here. If anything, she's like super go-lucky about it. And she's not being met with someone who's giving her much of anything. And that's really frustrating. So you see that. But Pastor Cal kind of says, listen, if you, essentially, in a nutshell, he says, if you continue to do this, then, it's not going to work out, because she's going to feel like you don't want her and denied and shut off, and that's just not a good emotional space to be in. Jephte does say, hey, I don't understand why that isn't good. And that really irritated me when he said that, but I am glad to see that he was able to take in what Pastor Cal said when he explained it, and that shows that he is willing to at least listen, because he says, you know what, I do see a connection with my wife, I do see it moving forward, and I trust the experts, and I trust that they have my best interest in mind. So he's willing to go, and you see him soften a little bit. He seems a little more jokey throughout the episode. It's really like watching a child in adult shoes is what I see. Like, they teeter-totter and they fall all over the place. What's frustrating for us is that he's not cute and 3 years old. He's 26 and he's 6'4". So for us, it doesn't translate that he's like a baby, but essentially he's like a little boy in that way. And he even says, which was like a breakthrough, I like screamed when I saw it. He even says, I don't know what marriage is supposed to look like. His words are, I don't have a vision for what marriage is supposed to look like. I don't have that background. So I'm like, oh my God, that is so huge. And that is so important to see, because at least he's aware. There's some awareness that he doesn't know. I mean, we all know that he doesn't know, but the fact that he says he doesn't know gave me a little bit of room to soften, because that's huge. Going back to expectations, going back to, I think we talked about a few weeks ago, family dynamics, and, coming from single parent homes or coming from certain relationship dynamics that you see even in dual parent homes, really, really reflects itself in the way that you continue on your relationships later on in life. So you guys, he doesn't know. And if he's willing to be taught and willing to be uncomfortable, there might be some room for like a happy ending. I can't say that right now. I'm not going to go on a limb and say there'll be a happy ending, because knowing is not enough. But that was huge for me, because of course I'm thinking, and I've been thinking for weeks, where's this high reservation coming from? Is coming from a single parent home something that he's dealing with, which I already know, yes, but in what facet? Was his mother ever married? We don't know that. She's raised 9 kids alone, or he's one of 9, and who belongs to who? There's so many things here that play a role. And he even said something like he doesn't want to be hurt. So chances are he's been hurt in the past. And to be honest, men don't bounce back as quickly from being hurt as women do. I think women are built for bullshit. It's unfortunate, but we are conditioned to learn how to move on. And men don't do that as easily. Fact, they just don't. They're not conditioned in the way that we are. And I'm not saying it's okay that we have to put up with that, or that we choose to put up with that sometimes, but it is what it is. We just don't stay in that place as long as our counterparts. And so maybe he was hurt in the past, or maybe he has seen hurt. If he's watching it through his mother's eyes, and he's the oldest and he has protected her all this time, maybe he doesn't want to repeat what's been done to her. So there's a lot of things going on here, and we don't know. So we can just kind of guess and go from there. Obviously, I'd love to get my hands on everybody, but based on what I'm seeing, these are the things that are coming up for me. So there is room for breakthrough. There's room for a process if he's willing. That will remain to be seen. Somebody mentioned a comment that they would like to see more interaction throughout, like, the dating process, because here it is, they get married immediately, and it's kind of like, go 100% throughout this marriage, but they haven't really done the stuff. So a lot of people were saying they'd like to work backwards. And it got me thinking, because it's such high stakes, we really have to maybe take this process a little more seriously. We think that by putting the highest stakes at the beginning, that people are going to respond to it, and they do, but they don't, because they're still not working out. Like in the collective numbers, it's usually not working out because it is so high. So what I'd love to see, if I could design my own show, what I would love to see, and of course I'd be one of the experts, because why not? I'm obsessed with it anyways. What I'd love to see is maybe a show where because people are willing to get married, okay? People are willing to do whatever it takes, because relationships are the foundation of human connection, okay? A lot of people think about money first, they think about all these other things, but how many of us has been wildly successful, but if your relationship, any relationship, the relationship with self, the relationship with others, the relationship with family, whatever, if those things are not in a good space, they affect everything else. Your mental space affects everything else. So I would love to see maybe a project where there's a 6 to 8 week window where people date and court and do things that would bring about fruitful experiences that create sustainable relationships, and then maybe and then they have sessions in between that, so they could say, you know what, this person on the second date really did this and that really pissed me off. So I could say, here, let's talk about why that pissed you off. Let's talk about how to rectify that. Let's talk about how that doesn't make for a long-term relationship. Now they've gotten all this coaching on top of like this process, and then at the end of the 8 weeks they choose to get married or not. I believe that would probably have more success long term. I mean, I'm literally just throwing it out there. But if we could just reverse it, where still marriage is the end goal, because that's what people are wanting, but we gave them just a little more support, and then they can still choose to get married. And it may or may not work out, but they can still choose to get married after that 8 weeks versus getting married at the 8 weeks and then working backwards, and getting support along the way to kind of mitigate, because we're watching these things as they've already happened. So to kind of mitigate throughout that process, I think that would be, I think that would be great. I need to think of a name for that. 8 weeks to march down the aisle or something. I don't know. That's not a good name. But yeah, I think that would be great. So I think that's it. They get together towards the end of the episode, or maybe the middle of the episode, where it's guys' time and girls' time. I still like that, because how many of us can't wait to get to one of our girlfriends and talk about things, or the guys get together and they really need some male influence. And because this is such a high stress experiment, it's good that they have that. And I think that the network or episodes or experts are seeing, kind of looking back and saying, okay, what could have been done to make this process better for them, and they're implementing those things. So as you saw in the episode, the girls are so excited to get together, and the guys are like, oh, I needed guy time, because they need somewhere to kind of share this experience that most people cannot really understand. So I think that's it for this show. I've been getting a lot of, or this week, I've been getting a lot of requests for relationship advice. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start doing videos based on your questions. So feel free to email me or send a question in the comments below, and then I will pick a few questions every week, and I'll do a video response to those questions in tandem with the review video. So as always, if you loved it, subscribe, keep commenting. I love it, love it, love it. And I will see you next week.